Hello and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the To-Do List. I'm your host, Eric Fisher, and this is the show where I talk to the people behind the productivity. This week I'm excited to welcome back to the show John Jantsch. He was on the show earlier this year, back in January, which seems like years ago at this point. And in that episode, we talked about his new book at that time, The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur. And I decided that as the book is a daily reading book that gives you lessons and literature, etc., it made sense to jump into some of the most beneficial entries, specifically focusing in on resilience as we close out this calendar year, because I think it's something we all could use right now. So John and I focus in on entries from his book in the month of August, centering on the theme of resilience. And I think that you, if you're like me, are going to find this a helpful reminder of some of the ways that you can use perspective and action and consistent repetition to gain more resilience as we close out this calendar year and open up the next one. And I know that you, like me, are going to find this extremely helpful. So I will get out of the way and just say, enjoy this conversation with John Jantsch. Well, this week, it is my privilege to welcome back to the show, John Jantsch. John, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here. It's funny, we did our show when the book, The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur, came out, and it's one of those books that I think this is the fourth or fifth podcast that is actually having me back to talk about the same book, which is kind of a new phenomenon for me. But this is one of those books that just recycles every year. It's because it's a calendar book. I guess I'll be doing this for years. Well, I'll see you next fall or spring.
Yeah, I'm sure. You know what? It's a date. It's a date, John, because
right.
What I love about this book, and I mean, we talked all about it, and we probably should, for somebody who hasn't heard that first episode, we should give a little disclaimer as to, okay, what is the book, and kind of break it up real quick and do a quick summary. But I want to dive into a specific theme that is one of the monthly themes in the book. But let's give that little synopsis of what the book is.
Yeah, so it's 366 daily meditations to feed your soul and grow your business. So it is set up as a daily read. Takes you about 2 minutes. You show up whatever date it is. You flip to that date, and you're going to find three things. You're going to find a passage from some mid-19th century literature that I think is tremendously focused on entrepreneurs. You're going to see me riff for about 100, 150 words about that particular passage, and then I leave you every day with a question. So it's kind of one of those morning ritual, build into, some part of your day kind of books for some inspiration. It's, I actually refer to it as a more of a practice, than a book that you take on vacation and read.
So we mentioned before, we talked about this almost a year ago. It feels like, well, I mean, it feels way more than that, but it was January and the book came out late last fall.
That's right.
What's funny is we recorded prior to COVID this year, in the year of 2020, and we're recording this now in December. And so that kind of was on my mind. I'm thinking, it was great that this book came out when it did, because people had this all this year. And of course, unfortunately, some people did not. So I'm kind of like, hey, now's the time to maybe revisit that or pick it back up, especially if you already own it. But I could not help but think when I knew I was going to talk to you again that I wanted to hit on something that was going to provide some meaning, some solace, some bolstering to not just the entrepreneurial spirit or entrepreneurs out there, but just people in general, which this book is great for also. And I couldn't help but think of the theme of the month of August, which is resilience, which is kind of ironic. The whole book is called The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur. But what is your kind of take on that word resilience?
Well, sure. So as you noted, actually there are 12 months. And so I gave each month a theme, which kind of helped me organize it. And frankly, when I was thinking resilience, I was not thinking, of course, of a global pandemic. I was thinking of the fact that entrepreneurs always have required, resilience. I think throughout history, I think the most successful entrepreneurs have always had a way of kind of reframing, even success, but certainly failure as, little more than a chance to learn. And that, I think anybody who's done this for any amount of time realizes that if you're going to get bogged down on what happened today or what might happen tomorrow, as opposed to just like getting up and seeing how you can change the world, you're going to have a tough time as an entrepreneur. So, and I really do think the key word is the ability to reframe. It's not just a matter of saying, I'm going to soldier on. It's just like, I don't care, what's happening to me. I'm going to keep going. I mean, there is an element of resilience there, but I think it's more about like, why did this happen? What am I here to learn, from this thing? And I think you can certainly, as a human being, apply that to the year of 2020. I think a lot of people, if they didn't, they missed the boat. But I think a lot of people probably learned a lot about themselves, about their relationship to others, about their relationship to, our tiny speck on this planet over the course of this last year. At least that's certainly what I've taken away from kind of the great pause. And now as, we're trying to move through it.
Yeah, I definitely did. I think that's been one of the things that, this book has been very handy for. So thank you for that. And just, taking that time in the mornings or, mid mornings to read, to journal, to reflect. That's been part of that. And so, again, that's where this book has fit in for me. And I know others as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like I like today. There's a typical day. I have 6 meetings today, calling this a meeting. And, by the time I'm done today, I'm going to be pretty mentally and physically drained. And I see kind of my morning ritual as it's like fill up the tank again, because you're going to go out there and you're going to need all of the positive vibes and energy to be able to handle whatever happens, planned or unplanned. And I think that if I weren't to have that kind of morning ritual, I think a lot of times you can go out there, without the right armor on.
Well, what do you say we jump into some specific entries that I've earmarked here in that theme of resilience from that month of August? Okay. Man, I wish it were August right now. I'd feel a lot better. It's we've just had some snow and it's like, oh man, we're in for winter now. So
yeah.
My first entry that I've selected is August 4th, and it's titled "Suffering Strengthens."
Yeah. So it's funny. So as I mentioned, the writings that start off this are all from the mid-19th century, and they many of them were from a group of people that were labeled as transcendentalists, which was basically just they were heretics because they were saying you should think for yourself, and we should stop paying attention to maybe what the government says or what the preacher says, and kind of rely on ourselves, not to go it alone, but to trust ourselves enough to make decisions. And I think that's a theme that obviously the pandemic and really even I would say the political divide that had been going on maybe for several years before the pandemic, to me kind of mirrors what was going on in the mid-19th century. We were on the cusp of the Civil War. Women were not allowed to vote, but we're certainly starting to march in the streets. We were trying to abolish the legal act of human slavery. And I know that sounds a little dramatic, but I think there would be those that could say, maybe we've recycled again into right. kind of a period of upheaval. And I will say that that's what motivated me to write the book as much as anything. I think entrepreneurs have always been, but certainly increasingly become the voice of good and of positive change. And so I think that, an army of self-reliant entrepreneurs is really going to bring us back to some sense of normalcy if that ever exists. So I know you didn't ask me to go on that long rant, but
no, I appreciate it. I see the parallels.
Setting up, why I chose the writers that I chose. And what's great is, this writing is 150 years old, and it many times, sounds as relevant today as it certainly did then. You picked a hard one, though, because you picked Emily Dickinson,
yes.
And poetry, which for a lot of people is like, what is that all about? And of course, she was a little on the darker side, too. But do you want me to read this or just chat about it?
You know what? I think seriously, I hadn't had a plan for that. I think last time we went ahead and you read one or two of them, and then we went through it. But of course, I don't want to just make you, hey, let's have John come on and read his book to us. This isn't right. The audiobook. But I think maybe if there's anything that jumps out to you, I kind of have a couple of thoughts, I guess. Why maybe did you select this passage, I guess, is a good place to start.
Well, sure. So I think a lot of, if anybody's read any Emily Dickinson, she could be a little bit on the dark side, cynical side at times. And, I think a lot of, what she says in this passage is that, I kind of resum it in this, that which does not kill is only makes you stronger. And I think that her point in this is that time heals was kind of the point of that. And that, if you, today it may seem really bleak, but, over time you're going to find out it's actually going to make you stronger, and it'll take time for that, but you'll come out of this even stronger. And I think that, again, going to talk about, a lot of businesses certainly were wiped out by no fault of their own by the tsunami, of this being in the wrong industry at the wrong time. But I've also seen a whole lot of businesses get stronger, and not because they pivoted or started making some new product or service, but because they got closer to their customers, which is probably something that is always a good idea, but is easy in good times to kind of maybe neglect. And I think that's in a way, that sort of positive nature of being more human, more empathetic, getting closer to your customers is actually a thing that that resilience, plays a role in.
Yeah. It's almost like if the company was a person, it did its, thinking time, its contemplative time, and went back to bare bones and said, what does my existential crisis mean for me right now? And then how do I carry on forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I work with a lot of business owners, a lot of entrepreneurs, and I think that's a lesson that many of them have taken from this. We'll see, in 2 years from now, maybe it'll all be forgotten. But I think there are elements of what has gone on this last year that are going to color the next decade.
Yeah, for sure. So this entry, it's kind of a mix between, I don't want to be trite by saying this, but it's a mixture of time heals all wounds and what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But you need to hear those repeated over and over from somebody that you trust, because once in a while and or often we forget.
Yeah. Yep. She uses the word sinew in this, as sinews do with age, and some people that studied anatomy and physiology, sinew is often talked about as a part of the muscle, and the actual Greek definition was a source of power. And I think that's, in some ways, there will be people that this year has been a source of power.
So the next entry that I've got is actually the next day, August 5th. And this one I really like because it's called The First Dozen Times, and you've got Thoreau. This one actually I think would be best read.
Yeah. So, in this one I'm talking about the idea that our business is our practice. Working on our business is a lot of what this one has to do with. So you want me to go for it?
Yeah, let's do this. Let's read this one because I love Thoreau. So hearing it read is perfect.
Okay. August 5th, The First Dozen Times. Let me suggest a theme for you to state to yourself precisely and completely what that walk over the mountains amounted to for you. Returning to this essay again and again until you are satisfied that all that was important in your experience is in it. Give this good reason to yourself for having gone over the mountains, for mankind is ever going over a mountain. Don't suppose that you can tell it precisely the first dozen times you try, but at him again, especially where, after a sufficient pause, you suspect that you are touching the heart or summit of the matter. Reiterate your blows there and account for the mountain to yourself. Not that the story need be long, but will take a long while to make it short. That is from letters that Thoreau wrote. I think that one particularly was written to Nathaniel Hawthorne in 1857.
The section of a line in there is that for mankind is ever going over a mountain. It is what struck me. And I just couldn't help but think, yep, we all are always going over yet another mountain. This one's just bigger and we're all doing it together.
Yeah. Thoreau writes about mountains quite a bit. I went on to say, in your entrepreneurial journey, there lives a progression towards the heart or summit of the matter. It may at times take the disguise of progress, contraction, or more likely a plateau, and it will involve repetition, endless repetition to get it right. Thoreau loved mountains, and even in this letter to a friend, he used their image to speak of the pains involved in his creative writing process. With repetition comes muscle memory. Repetition allows us to better know ourselves, to better understand our value. With repetition comes simplicity. Repetition allows us to chisel away the parts that serve to weigh us or our ideas down. Repetition, some might call it practice, allows us to move from that uncomfortable space where our creativity is bred to that comfortable space where our creativity is grasped. And this is when we can share it with the world as we continue to practice and evolve still further. It may take you no time at all to find your story, but it will take repetition to make it short.
And then the challenge question at the end is, what aspect of your art needs practice and how will you get it?
Yeah.
And, man, I couldn't help but think of the word monotony feeling like something that people would identify with, currently, but that the word repetition and practice are positive spins to that word or that feeling of monotony. It's that, no, anchor yourself in the fact that you are doing the same thing over and over, or at least start to do the same thing over and over if you've done some of that, again, contemplative work, and do that intentional practice, not just monotonous, day in, day out showing up. Although there's something to be said for showing up.
Well, I think what happens, things become monotonous because we no longer pay attention. We're no longer mindful when we're doing them. And I think that one of the core messages I was trying to get across in this is that you're never done. I mean, you may think you've perfected something, but if you stop learning from it, the practice of it, then you are probably done. And that it will stale. It would no longer evolve. It will no longer bring as much value to the world. And I think that's the real point to me is, I mean, there are things that I've owned my own business for 30 years. I've been talking about marketing as a system for, a good 25 years of that. And the concept itself, still blossoms for me. I mean, it's still very much alive and evolving and changing. And I tell people all the time, I do a lot of training of consultants that use the duct tape marketing system. And I tell them all the time, I'll never be done with it.
Well, there's always more duct tape to put on.
Exactly.
The next one that I've got actually is one of my favorites. This is Mark Twain on August 8th, called Indestructibly Content. I think what I'll do is I'll read it. I'll read the entry by Mark Twain, and then you can maybe riff on what you wrote in addition to that. So let me get my book here. In a word, the whole human race is content, always content, persistently content, indestructibly content, happy, thankful, proud, no matter what its religion is, nor whether its master be a tiger or house cat. Am I stating facts? You know I am. Is the human race cheerful? You know it is. Considering what it can stand and be happy, you do me too much honor when you think that I can place before it a system of plain, cold, hard facts that can take the cheerfulness out of it. Nothing can do that. Everything has been tried, without success. I beg you not to be troubled. And that is Mark Twain from What is Man, 1906. Wow. Over 100 years ago.
Yeah. So the line that stuck out for me, of course, is, and why it became the title, Indestructibly Content, because I do think in life, in business, as entrepreneurs, we can get content. And there's nothing wrong with content necessarily, except that I think that's when mediocrity shows up. I mean, I'm not suggesting that you always have to be striving, and I'm definitely not the hustle and grind camp. But I do think that if you're not staying curious, if you're not figuring out how something could be better, if you're not challenging yourself, you're not growing anymore. And I think that's the challenge with Indestructibly Content, is that you stop growing.
Yeah. For me, that word content is usually a positive word. And that was what I was thinking of here in this entry. It's not as much of a positive word. It's in this, it's kind of like resting on your laurels or being, or warm and napping and laying on your past successes, not looking forward to the future. And I couldn't help but think of the juxtaposition again of we all were kind of content until recently. And then we got shaken out of our contentedness for better or for worse. And in a lot of ways, both.
I write about this in another part of the book somewhere. But one of the things I was really struck with is that, and travel, used to be the way to really witness this is how used we are to have become to being comfortable. And travel sort of shakes you out of your comfort zone, and it's inconvenient, and sometimes it's a pain in the butt, and sometimes it's that's why people get mad on planes and in airports, and you see all kinds of crazy behavior because we're not used to being uncomfortable anymore. And I think that there is some value in intentionally experiencing being uncomfortable. From time to time. I know there are people that talk about like the whole cold baths and the whole cold showers and that kind of stuff to actually intentionally make yourself uncomfortable. I think what it does is it has the value of bringing back into perspective everything that you have, everything that you get to experience. And I think that, that may seem a little out there for some people, but I do think that that's, parallels this idea of being content is that, if you're content, you're probably not doing your best work.
People have gone through worse, honestly, before. So my next one is August 11th, removing all obstacles. This one's an interesting one. I guess maybe go ahead and read this one again.
I think this one, in a word, is about perseverance.
Yes.
So it's not always those who have the best advantages or the greatest talents that eventually succeed in their undertakings, but it is those who strive with untiring diligence to remove all obstacles to success and who, with unconquerable resolution, labor on until the rich reward of perseverance is within their grasp. Then again, let me say to our young men, take courage. There's a good time coming. The darkness of the night appears greatest just before the dawn. It's worth noting that this is William Wells Brown, 3 years in Europe. And it's worth noting that Brown spent some time as a slave. So with that context, perseverance maybe takes on and resilience takes on a heightened meaning. Perseverance is a powerful tool for the world, for the would-be and experienced entrepreneur alike. The first step in building the grit to persevere is to make sure that your objectives are worth your perseverance. It's all a big fat balancing act. What are your relationships, health, and happiness worth anyway? Check. You've got this then. You know that however you've got it dialed in, there will always be times you want to quit. But resilience isn't about finding heroic mental stamina. It's about taking the next step, even though all you want to do is lie on your back and lazily toss and catch a baseball several thousand times. This is for illustration purposes only. You may or may not have ever done this. It's kind of soothing, though, but all right, where were we? To strive with untiring diligence to remove all obstacles to success is the answer. Remove all obstacles, one at a time, step by step. Cope by blowing off steam. Take every obstacle for what it's worth. Letting go of timelines. Celebrating everything. Sometimes a worthy goal is as small as making it to another sunrise. To bring a fresh pair of eyes to the obstacle. To win because you showed up.
And then the challenge question is, what is your definition of perseverance? And actually, I'm going to spin that back on you. What do you see as the relationship or the difference, if there is one, between the words resilience and perseverance?
So sometimes you persevere without an answer. You don't know why you're showing up. You just, history hopefully has maybe taught you to trust yourself enough to try it again, try it a different way. So, that in that sense, perseverance, is sort of the fighting between I don't want to do this and I do want to do this. Whereas I think resilience is more about the idea that okay, something good or bad happened. I'm not going to judge necessarily that it was good or bad. I'm going to judge it for what I learned from it.
Yeah. There's a number of lines in here that you've got that really stand out to me. That resilience isn't just about having that heroic mental stamina, but it's that taking that next step over and over again, even when all you want to do is lay on your back and then do whatever. But right.
Well, I use that example because when I was growing up, I played baseball, and I can't tell you how many times I would lay in bed and just throw the ball up at the ceiling. So maybe I was a little bit telling on myself there. But the other point that I think I was trying to make there too is sometimes resilience shows up in the form of procrastination. And a lot of people talking about good words, bad words. A lot of people think of procrastination as a bad thing. I can't tell you how many times throughout the course of my career where I had gained the experience or the wisdom to know when to wait and not to just push through something because it's like, I gotta make something happen. And I think that there's a lot in that as well. To resilience is that, maybe what I learned was, to not call that client back tomorrow and ask them if they got my proposal, but to actually, wait and let, whatever it is that's guiding us all around here, all the strings, around here, actually decide when something's going to happen. And I think that, that's a part of resilience as well.
That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it in that way. One of the other things I like that you've got here is that you say cope by blowing off steam, let go of timelines, and celebrate everything. And those are all three separate thoughts, but they all work together to kind of just say, look, you need to cut yourself some slack. You need to celebrate anything and everything. We just passed Thanksgiving here in the United States, and I kept constantly having to say, what am I thankful for? And being able to come up with lots of things I am thankful for to celebrate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think entrepreneurs are pretty famous for, looking at the horizon, the 3-year goal. And of course, we all know the horizon, when you drive towards it, it moves away from you. We're not so famous for turning around and going, dang, look how far I've come.
Let's see. I've got two more here that I think are really good ones, and it's August 14th and then the 17th. And so I think these are really good to kind of tie a bow on this theme for now. 14th is called Greet the Dawn. This is another Thoreau entry, in fact, from Walden, which I love. I'll go ahead and read this one, and then you can kind of do your spin on your writing again.
You bet.
So let's see here. I know of no more encouraging fact that the unquestionable ability of a person to elevate their life by a conscious endeavor. It is something to be able to paint a particular picture or to carve a statue, and so to make a few objects beautiful, but it is far more glorious to carve and paint the very atmosphere and medium through which we look, which morally we can do. To affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of arts. Man, before you go, I just want to say in there, to be able to carve and paint the very atmosphere and medium through which we look is just such a great way to say, to create your perspective and your mood and your vision of what you're seeing is, or even not just the vision of what you're seeing, but the vision of what you're seeing and how you're seeing it. It's so cool.
Well, I think what he's really saying too is it's a choice.
Yes.
And I think that's the part that's so, when you're in the midst of all the reaction and things going on, you forget that even how you decide to respond is a choice. And so, and I used this actually as I'm definitely a morning person. I'm up most days before the sun. To me, that's just the most precious, hopeful time, of any day. And I spend about an hour, doing things that I've done for years to get myself ready for the day. And even if I've had, the worst day possible, there've been more than one time that I've just said, you know what, I'm just going to go to bed. I'm going to let today go because I've always got tomorrow. And I think that, that speaks to resilience probably like nothing else.
There's something there about this practice of, I mean, speaking to morning rituals for sure, which is something obviously we talk a lot about on this show in other episodes, but man, I've just never really heard about it put that way or thought about it that way, that it's that atmosphere and medium, through which we look. And he even calls it the highest of arts, which is really cool.
Yeah, no question.
So, and then, let's see, sir, August, what did I say? 17th is, extreme self-care. And that sounds like a modern day, title in a beauty magazine or something, or blog.
It does. And I think that, the term self-care has certainly in some ways gotten a bad rap because, it has become sort of the influencer on YouTube's, mantra for, showing people rituals of his self-care. But I think the reality is that, we may not be talking about a cucumber mask. We may just be talking about, the way we trust and our curiosity and the way that we are mindful, as much as possible, the way we judge or don't judge things. Gratitude, frankly, is extreme self-care or a practice of at least expressing gratitude, for the gifts that we do have and the day that we do get. I mean, I think to me, those are all examples of self-care that I think need to be intentional.
Yeah. So, funny, this is another Mark. I think I picked Thoreau and Mark Twain, and then the Emily Dickinson one. I think that was pretty much what happened here. I didn't even really notice that. Obviously you can see who my favorites are. So,
Twain is just so funny.
Oh, geez. I love Twain. So I'm wondering, I don't know if this one makes a whole lot of sense to read or not. But I think that the mark here that I really want to land on is that self-care can feel very selfish, that it can feel like it's something that, I can't take care of myself because I've got other people that depend on me. And I always go to the thing Michael Hyatt says, where he says, on airplanes, they tell you to put your mask on first and then take care of the others. And that's not a selfish thing, because by doing that, you're then able to perform to a much higher caliber or to a much better quality, or be present at all for everybody. And it doesn't take a lot to put that mask back on, or your mask on first, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it also, I think to me, it almost goes even a little deeper. It's very difficult for you to give something to somebody that you don't possess yourself. Mm-hmm. And so if our job is to care for others and to teach others and to, mentor, and we're not doing sort of the same or getting the same, possessing the same for ourselves, you're going to be less likely to be able to deliver that value to somebody else. So that's to me, I do talk about, I think there are self-care things. Obviously we've got mind, body, and spirit that need care. So, it can be things like, I think I even put in there putting sunscreen on, is certainly a form of self-care that everybody can relate to. But so is, frankly, defriending somebody on Facebook that maybe is bringing you negative vibes.
Yeah. Pruning of input sources that sap that energy. Like you said earlier, first thing in the morning, you're filling the tank back up again. And, you go throughout the day and you realize, man, I've got leaks here and there. Figuring out those leaks, that's one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a form of care, blocking out anything that's toxic, whether it's a chemical form or in word and deed.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, thoughts, man. I will be honest here. And over the course of the past, in particular with politics in the past, 3-4 months, I've had waves of it where I've had to just completely cut out news for weeks on end, because it just wasn't going to make any difference for me to check daily. I could check once a week, maybe on the weekend when I had more space to, like, if something bothered me that I read, I could shake it off a little bit better because I had the time and space to do so. But that was definitely one of those things.
Yeah, no question. I think that, it's okay to get upset. It's okay to be an activist. It's okay to want to change things. But I do think that when our emotions are dictated by things that are out of our control, that's when it starts to bring us down.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So mind, body, and spirit. I love that you put in here to, get more laughter, and even go on writing thank you notes and things like that. This is the kind of stuff that, again, when we're kind of content, referring back to the old post we were old entry we were talking about, when we get lulled into just complacency and contentment, and we don't think about what's most important, then we're not going to be thinking, if we're not already set up the habit of self-care, of all this different self-care pieces here, but specifically ones that are like outward reaching to connect with people in meaningful ways. And even, we love digital, but in analog ways, like thank you notes, I have heard that pen pals have started to make a comeback recently in recent months. So
I certainly would not be the least bit surprised about that. You think about some of the, when you were growing up as a kid, your friends were, everything. And so you think about some of these 10, 12-year-old kids that, no longer get to hang out with their friends in real life. I'm sure in many cases they're doing everything they can to stay in contact. Of course, like you said, texting and Instagram and all those kind of things adds a layer of connection that we didn't have. But I'm sure that's still not, that pales as the primary way.
Well, I did want to also call out, I didn't select, I almost, once I started getting going, looking through the book to see what could we talk about, I looked and I saw August obviously stood out as resilience, and
sure,
that made the most sense to spend the most time on. I don't want to dive any deeper, but I do want to stay, broader and say that, by the way, October, all about change. And December, where we're at right now as we record this, is grace. And I think those are two other components that if you have the book or if you grab the book, will be very beneficial to people right now. I don't know if you have any, thoughts that jump out to you as I bring up those themes or those, words, but I'd kind of like to close on that in terms of, not only resilience, but change and grace is another place that a lot of people are at or will be at soon.
Well, there is a seasonal component to the themes. There's not a chronological component necessarily. It's not like you have to go through resilience before you can have grace.
Right.
But there is a seasonal aspect to this, and I think that entrepreneurs, I myself, came up with that seasonal structure because I've probably gone through. I can readily identify numerous times of cycling through the seasons in my entrepreneurial journey. And they're really more about, how you're viewing things, what happens, then what happens next. And I think that a lot of entrepreneurs a lot of people have probably experienced a real compression of the seasons, if you will. And some are starting over again. Some are, moving in another direction. Some are, trying to figure out, how to deal with change that maybe was good for their business even. And so, that to me, what I was really getting at point wise with that is that even though this book follows a calendar year, whenever you pick up the book is the right place for you to start. And, you, Eric, now are going to, I assume, cycle through maybe another year. And I will challenge you to read those new entries. And maybe you did in preparation for this show and kind of thought, that strikes me a little different this year because maybe I'm a little different person.
Yeah. I totally can see that. I mean, I even just recently, I was rereading a book I hadn't read in a long time.
Yeah.
And just the person I was the first time I read that versus now. So yeah, so obviously with picking and choosing some great literature as your basis for the entries here, I can see where each year coming back around to these favorite passages or favorite days is going to bolster and or strike in a different way this time.
Yeah, it's funny because obviously I wrote the book, but I mean, many of these entries I wrote in mid 2018, believe it or not, and So I pick up the book every day and read, today's entry, and there are a lot of entries that I don't remember writing. And it's not just forgetfulness. I think it's just, it's to your point. I mean, I'm a different person, 2 years later.
And that's a good thing. And let's go with that as kind of our closing button here, is that this book is honestly one of the things that honestly has really helped me personally. So again, publicly as a podcast, I listener and or writer, projector, host, whatever, all those different hats. I just want to say thank you for doing this. I'm glad that you followed through on this because it's going to be great. And actually, I know you've got another book coming up like soon. I just saw the announcement.
I do. I actually just turned it in, but I'm still in the traditional publishing model. And so it's not going to be, it's coming out from Harper Collins leadership. But it won't be until October of 2021, depending upon when you're listening to this. It's called The Ultimate Marketing Engine.
Yeah. So maybe we'll have to figure out a way to have you back to even if we just hit on this book again and then mention that one or something. We'll see.
You bet. Happy to do it, Eric.
Yeah. John, always great talking with you. So glad we got to do this again. And we'll definitely do it again soon.
Awesome.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed revisiting The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur with John Jantsch. I can't express enough how important a book this is for daily reading. If you don't already have it, I would highly encourage you to pick it up. You can find the link in the show notes. And I hope that you, like me, found something incredibly helpful in this episode talking with John about resilience, about changing your perspective, about waking in the morning and setting your perspective, about self-care, and mostly about perseverance. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love for you to share it with somebody you know needs to hear it, to be reminded of those things as well. To do that, just hit the share button wherever you're listening to this, whatever podcast player app of choice you're using, or again, head on over to the show notes at beyondthetodolist.com. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you again for listening, and I will see you next episode.